It's my pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Dubravka Ugresic. I have known Dubravka Ugresic for a number of years as a sister Slavist, and I have enjoyed reading her creative writing and have admired it also for many years. But a bit of background. Dubravka Ugresic was born in Croatia, the Republic of Croatia, in Yugoslavia. She studied comparative literature at the University of Zagreb with a specialization in Russian literature, and she continued to work there as a researcher, scholar, editor until she left Croatia in 1993. But she was known in Croatia and is, as she is everywhere now, as a creative writer, and she achieved quite the reputation in Yugoslavia as an awarded writer. The work that most people know from that period, beyond the boundaries of former Yugoslavia, is the work Štefica Cvek in the Jaws of Life. That work was adapted to film and directed by Rajko Grlić in 1984. It was published in 1981, and it was extremely popular. We own that film in the media library. We show it in classes. It is not only a fine work of literature and a fine film, it has matured in very interesting ways as the context of the film has changed post-Yugoslavia. So if you've not seen In the Jaws of Life, I suggest you get it and watch it, and if you've not seen it in class. When nationalism was on the rise, Dubravka Ugresic took a very strong stand against it and eventually against the war. For that, she was harassed in the media and threatened, and eventually in 1993 she left Croatia. She earned an international reputation then in Europe, and already in 1996 she received the Charles Vaillant Award for the best book of essays in Europe for that year for The Culture of Lies. Many of you have read excerpts from The Culture of Lies or know the entire work. And if anyone ever asks me what one work they should read to understand what Yugoslavia was and what happened to it, I recommend The Culture of Lies. Dubravka Ugresic has written fiction that also reflects the war and aftermath, such as The Museum of Unconditional Surrender and Nobody's Home. And she has also written other works. For now, she is public intellectual and cultural commentator and has produced some very interesting works. For instance, Baba Yaga Laid an Egg. These are all translated into English, which is a fictional exploration of femininity, aging, and folklore. And her most recent work, Karaoke Culture, has just been released in English translation in the United States, and that is the main reason that she is in the United States right now, to celebrate that. And tomorrow at Brookline Booksmith at 7 o'clock, she'll have a reading if you are interested in that particular work. Dubravka Ugresic is perfectly poised to consider life during communism in Eastern Europe and its aftermath. She was born at one end of the communist world, and she became a specialist in the Soviet Union's culture and literature at the other end of the communist world. And she has lived for many years now in Europe, the European Union, and for many years has been a citizen of the Netherlands. So she has a perfect perch from which she can look east and back. And so today I would like to welcome our speaker, Dubravka Ugresic, and for her talk about various issues around nostalgia, ostalgia, and memory stick.
Thank you for coming. I must say that I prepared myself, and this is the proof. But I decided suddenly not to read anything, but to talk to you, because it seems to me that word nostalgia must be totally abstract to you. I mean, you're so young. There is nothing to be nostalgic for. I mean, so it is, the word is pretty pretty difficult to explain. Besides, I've learned that my favorite actress, you probably never heard of her. Her name was Simone Signoret, French actress. She wrote an autobiography under the approximate English title, which is Nostalgia is Not What It Used to Be. So this is another problem with our word notion of nostalgia, that it changes. It is extremely elusive. It is very personal feeling. It is generational. It is. It depends on your age, on your experience, on who you are. Nostalgia has such a paradoxical terms that, for instance, I was a couple of days ago. I was in Oberlin. Oberlin, coming from New York. Why is that important? It is important because Oberlin is not even as big as the tiniest neighborhood in New York. So it's a tiny place, a small college. There is nothing there, except a beautiful park, a local hotel, one street with two weird shops. One shop, in the window you could see wool for knitting, lots of wool, and another shop is something which provoked a punch of nostalgia in me suddenly. Why? Because it was a shop where you could find anything and everything. They sold books. They also sold something which is difficult to see anywhere, those ballet of fabric, bowls of fabric. So obviously local women, they still keep their sewing machines. There is a market for those balls of fabric, wool, of course, all sorts of food, all sorts of unbelievable things. And then I remembered that in former Yugoslavia, those little shops from my childhood, where you could buy, they were something in between stationery and food shop, and you could buy ice cream there, you could buy needle, you could buy anything in the world. So, and then it started. Then I asked myself, for God's sake, my nostalgic field would certainly be, because I was born in 1949. Yes, I'm that old. So it should consist of understandable symbols like hammer and sickle, red star. I was born in communist Yugoslavia. Probably of image of Comrade Tito, or brigades or pioneers with their uniforms, with blue caps, with a red star, and but nothing of that is really mine. Suddenly, I got this nostalgic punch in Oberlin, where where I had never been, and according to the logic, why Oberlin suddenly provoked such feelings? And then, of course, I remembered that there is it's very logical, because my nostalgic referential field is in fact not Yugoslavia of 50s or 60s, but America. of 50s and 60s. And that special provincial America. Why is that so? So, it happened that Yugoslavia had a little bit different biography and a little bit different CV than other communist countries. So, Tito was the guy who refused, who didn't want Yugoslavia to be a part of Warsaw Pact. So, Yugoslavia was practically expelled from the Brotherhood of Communist Countries, and that was in the year 1948, 49. We, of course, learned in our textbooks that Tito sent his famous historical no to Stalin. But thanks to that famous historical no, in 1953, the first American movie came into Yugoslav cinemas, and that was Water Ballet with Esther Williams in the main role. You don't know who is Esther Williams, right? Okay. So, but after 1953, Yugoslavia was flooded, thank you. It was flooded by Hollywood movies. So, as Hollywood movies were much more present than, let's say, children's books, because publishing industry was not yet developed in 1953. So, and as my mother, she liked very much, she was a movie goer and movie fan, I would go to cinema with her as 4 years old and watch even one movie several times. So I knew by heart all the Hollywood stars of that time, and probably I knew it better than movie critics of that time, because it was also quite popular to have albums. The first chewing gums appeared on poor Yugoslav market, and chewing gums, they had a little portrait of Hollywood stars. So we would collect those little pictures of Hollywood stars. We would also get personal answers of, like me, for instance, once I got a letter from Kirk Douglas. So, yes, Hollywood stars, they thought of us. They were sending us letters, and we adored them. So my first love was Audie Murphy. You don't know who is Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy, right? Does anybody know? You do. Tell us, who was Audie Murphy? Yes. 22 medals he got. He was ordained by 22 medals for his bravery. So Audie Murphy, although he was the ugliest, I can sign that now. He was the ugliest actor ever. But we adored him, particularly me, because, he was brave, he was playing in all those, war movies, and later on he was a famous killer of poor Indians in Western movies. So it was that was Audie Murphy. And all my childhood consisted of not only of images from American Hollywood movies, but also of stories. Why? Because my mother, she liked to repeat stories and to tell me the stories about unhappy Ava Gardner, or about wicked Bette Davis, and about beautiful Elizabeth Taylor and her numerous husbands and so on and so forth. So that was my my culture when I was a little girl, because there was a poverty, post-war poverty, and there wasn't anything like kids have today. Children's culture consisting of games and all that richness of movies and cartoons and books and games and clothes and everything. So another referential important point, which was the trigger for that nostalgia I felt in Oberlin, about that communist nostalgia I felt in Oberlin. So it was American literature. What American literature? Because I was too small then. So I got it from my mother. My mother read American novels, particular American novels, which were extremely popular in Yugoslavia after the Second World War. And these are social novels of 30s. Theodore Dreiser was a star. And for instance, when recently, a couple of years ago, in a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis, There Will Be No Blood, based on Upton Sinclair's novel, Oil, I suddenly realized that Yugoslav first edition of Oil was in fact my notebook. And even today, there is, in my mother's little library, there is a proof that first Yugoslav edition of Oil, published in 1946, and my first drawings on that book, because we didn't have at that time gorgeous drawing pads and things. So the book served as a drawing pad. And also, through my mother, I got a world of that, described in those novels. A little bit later on, when I was a teenage girl, what we saw on TV was, and that was the first mammoth TV series. It was Peyton Place, again, small American provincial place, and of course I identified, because I was a teenage girl then, 12 probably, so identified tremendously with Alison Mackenzie. You don't know who Alison Mackenzie was, but she was a teenage girl who wrote poetry, played by Mia Farrow. So I remember that she walked through all those numerous series with a book under her shoulder, and I tried desperately to imitate her. So I was walking around in the little place, not called Peyton Place, but Kutina, a provincial place in former Yugoslavia. I walked with the book of poetry under my shoulder. So this is just a small example. How does it work? It could work in totally unexpectedly different areas, nostalgia. But then also what happened, this is what I experienced now, recently, a couple of days ago, in the place called Oberlin. But nostalgia, in fact, became an issue for me a little bit before Yugoslavia fell apart, a little bit before the war. So I didn't know that there will be a war. I didn't know that Yugoslavia will fall apart. But I had this feeling that something is wrong, that the whole world will disappear, and that something should be done about that. So with two friends, we were sort of talking, imagining, even joking about our future project, about lexicon of Yugoslav mythology, meaning that three of us, we are going to work on popular culture, because I also realized that popular culture is the warmest point of nostalgia, in fact, because we remember when we listen to some very kitschy pop song, for instance, and we know exactly when it was, when we, for the first time, we heard it. So about Yugoslav movie, about Yugoslav pop culture, about Yugoslav TV stars, about all that emotional garbage, which was our garbage. It was our heritage of popular culture. So, but then the war happened, and the whole that project was nostalgic project was forgotten for a while. Also, what happened? It happened that the same, maybe not projects, but the same feeling of loss, or the same feeling that the whole worlds are falling apart, became common to many people in East Europe. The wall fell. It was in 1989. The Soviet Union fell apart. And East and West Germany, they became one state, although the life in between two was extremely different. For the first time, East Germans, who wanted so desperately to become like West Germans, suddenly got that strange feeling of the Ostalgia. Ostalgia, some of them were accused that, in fact, some interpreters of that strange feeling thought that Ostalgia means nostalgia for communist times, which was not truth. Ostalgia became a sort of legal, I would say, and understandable feeling simply because all cultural power was taken by Wessis. That's how they call themselves. Wessis meaning West Germans, and Ossis meaning East Germans. So the power, cultural power, was taken by Wessis, and other power too, economical, financial, political, and so on and so on. And suddenly, ugly refrigerators produced in East Germany started to disappear. And somehow Ossis started to protest, because those ugly refrigerators, they were always there So why should, for God's sake, they disappear from their landscape? The same was happening in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavs, they coined the term Jugo-nostalgia. So now we have nostalgia, we have Ostalgia, and we have Jugo-nostalgia. Why, and what is in fact Jugo-nostalgia? Jugo-nostalgia was not coined by nostalgic people, but by politicians and by, I would say, Croatian, mostly politicians, because it was coined to be a sort of political accusation. The people who are nostalgic for Yugoslavia, which in the meantime fell apart, in fact are nostalgic for, they opt for communism, they want the old system to come back, and so on and so forth. So at that time it was pretty dangerous accusation. Not very pleasant, but nevertheless, to be or to plead for that past which was suddenly confiscated was an act of subversion. It went so far, I mean, it was so stupid that even, quoting Đorđe Balašević, Yugoslav pop singer, was an act of political subversion, which is really, it's silly, but that's how it was. Because I remember how my mother was unhappy that in one moment, over the night, she could not watch anymore her favorite TV shows if they were produced in Belgrade, because it was a common TV program. I mean, you could switch Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, and so forth. And then, when the war started, one could not watch anymore anything except Croatian TV in Croatia. And all that Yugoslavism, Yugoslav culture, all those TV shows, movies, pop songs, all was deleted because people in the power didn't want ordinary people to remember anything from former Yugoslavia. And remembrance, of course, was the strongest in those warm, emotional references like songs and movies and TV series, celebrities, Yugo-celebrities. Situation, of course, changed within the time, and now it is a little bit different situation. So today I would say that what is happening is that, yes, one could watch the old TV program and old movies, one could see that. Besides, internet is playing tremendous role. So Jugo-nostalgia became senseless as a subversive act. It's not subversive at all, because all the things that I personally thought I would never ever see appeared on TV, on internet. So you can find whatever you want to on YouTube. Whatever your nostalgic heart wishes is there. The same is with Soviet culture too. You can find, I mean, almost anything there, and even easier than before, like old communist movies, I mean, posters, whatever you want to. The same happened with Yugoslavia, so practically Yugo-nostalgia as accusation became totally senseless. What else is what happened is that, for instance, there is a market for Yugo-nostalgic souvenirs too. Today you can buy socks with Tito's image on the socks. You can buy wine with Tito's signature on that wine. You can buy a cookbook with favorite Tito's recipes. There are three or two wonderful documentaries produced by young women, apparently, young women directors about Yugo-nostalgia, about two of them about figure of Tito. So it seems that there is no point anymore mentioning all of them. But I think that it's a tricky business, because again we have a paradox here that, for instance, you can't find decent books about Yugoslav period. You can't find decent books about Yugoslav history. You can't find decent analysis about Tito's figure, for instance. But you can find, the Tito's cookbook is a bestseller. So what you have now is that with trivial, banal side, with souvenirs, with all that market of trivia, again, real problems are covered, and the real remembrance of real memory or relevant remembrance is suppressed. So what I want to say is that playing with nostalgia is a tricky business. You can abuse it, you can use it, you can manipulate with it, you can proclaim it subversive act, but it could be the opposite too, like in this case with lack of serious historical work on that period, but just covering it with souvenirs like this is enough. We solved the job of thinking about the past epoch. You are yawning, so I will stop here and ask you to ask me questions. If you have some.
Do you yourself feel sort of a yearning at times for the way things used to be for yourself?
Yes. I in fact initiated that. I left Croatia in 1993. In 1996, 97, I was invited to Amsterdam, and I had the students there. And my students were mostly, it is wrong to say mostly, because they were all ex-Yugoslavs from all the former Yugoslav republics. I had only one Dutch student. So what I started with them it was a game of remembrance, you know, because it seemed to me that we have to solve somehow that trauma of ours, and then that imposed stigma that we should do something with that, and especially because of the fact that my students were from different ethnic origins. So we started the project of collecting personal memories. And later on, like maybe a year, 2, 3 years ago, a student of mine, she put that on website. And for a year or two, the website was pretty dead. But then, suddenly, some young people all over the world, they started to send their little memories. Memories about first chocolate, chocolate made in Yugoslavia, about first teddy bear, about first song they remembered, and so on and so forth. And there it was that lexicon of Jew mythology started to grow. And then what happened? Probably the usual story that a couple of years later, some very, let's say, skillful people in the term of marketing, they simply took that from the website. They did a book, and the book became sort of bestseller, and today we have a third edition of that book. I didn't want to be responsible for that. I even didn't like it, how the whole thing develops. But at least the big thing was done. Because today there are several theater plays which are playing this game of remembrance, and they're quite popular. So recently there is a documentary was done by Belgrade, a TV director about Yugo nostalgia. So at least something is done in the mindsets of the people that remembrance is not politically incorrect job, that it is welcomed, that we should keep our past, whatever the contents of that package of nostalgia is, and so on and so forth. I wrote a novel. The title of that novel is Ministry of Pain. And in that novel, I tried to describe part of that atmosphere in Amsterdam and my work with the students. It is not an autobiographical novel, but yes, I used certain knowledges about the life of Yugoslav immigrants in Amsterdam, Amsterdam topography, and knowledge of that traumatic, of that trauma of remembrance and forgetting. Sorry.
All right. I've never asked you this, so let me ask you this.
Yes.
Today, looking back on what happened to Yugoslavia, would you say that if this could have been done peacefully, it would be a better, it would still be, it would actually be a good thing? I say that because I've heard a friend say that, coming to the realization that Croatian
Yeah.
nationalists, that's a lot to understand.
Yeah.
That they were manipulated, but somehow it feels better to be separate.
Yeah.
What would you say today about the dissolution of Yugoslavia?
Yeah. No, I would say that the whole job of dissolution was unnecessary. It was stupid because people got impoverished. I mean, many materially. I mean, churches were destroyed, people were killed, roads were grenaded. I mean, libraries were burned, and so on and so forth. So this material damage is big, you know. And of course, the most important of all, that some figures are always, you know, incorrect, but people say some 300,000 people around were killed. And we are not talking because we don't know those figures. How many people left the country, you know.
But what I mean,
And,
if there were a velvet revolution, if it had been that, if it
Yeah.
had been dissolution without war,
Yeah.
what do you think? Do you think that would have been a better thing, or the maintaining of Yugoslavia?
First of all, I think that Yugoslavia was quite a decent country, you know. That Yugoslavia was a country with many privileges, comparing to other countries of other communist countries. So yes, if we had the same iconography, you know, I mean those dictators walking in, you know, white jackets and trousers and ready to shoot some bear and also ready to play a little bit of piano. I mean, it is iconography, but the contents of life was not the same. I know that because as a student, I spent a year in the Soviet Union in Moscow. I was a Western girl there. I was a Western girl. So Yugoslavia was a decent country. It had many, I'm not going to count now because I mean you know all of that. It had many good things. Besides, European Union, you know, is organized quite similar as former Yugoslavia. You know, it was the same ideology as, you know, respect towards nationalities, regions, cultures, all about that. I mean, managers and the ideologues of European Union are preaching. Like before, I mean, Yugoslav ideologues. So it's the same thing, that respect towards nationalities, ethnicities, ethnical culture, regional culture, and so on and so forth. Besides, it was also international. I'm not going to say now yes. I mean, it was, but it was. Excuse me. It was such a big difference in between people in Bulgaria and people in Yugoslavia, just because one little detail, and that little detail was called passport, that you could travel all around without any visa. And another little detail was called foreign currency account, that you could have money in the bank, in dollars or francs or whatever. So it was open, it was international, whatever that meant, and there were, people today would laugh about that, like self-management, for instance. But that was the great idea, excuse me. Self-management. Then they would laugh about policy of non-alignment and non-aligned countries. But that was also a great idea. You know? So there are so many things which are somehow, because of that stigma, communist stigma, and that general, you know, like this, let us despise everything what those people did, because first of all they are from Balkans, they are wild, they could not keep together, they had those funny clothes, they were, they were not free, so they were forced to buy their Levi's, in Trieste, they didn't have enough coffee, and all that repertoire, you know, became boring, because we are listening about that, watching, laughing at that for years already. I think that it is about the time that some historians, some sociologists, some scholars should do their homework and do, you know, and do a serious work about that, about figures, you know, how many of this and how many of that. I also think that nationalism, it was the excuse. It was in fact the false thing. It was provoked thing. It was because through the war was the only way for all those people to separate, and separation was needed for a few to take money into their pockets, and that's it. It's very primitive, the whole thing. You know, only we scholars or former scholars or writers, we like to project something more, because this is so empty and this is so vulgar, you know. So we want to see something more in that. Like today's crisis, you know, it is so easy and so vulgar. What those bankers did. So we can't admit that it is so vulgar and so simple. That's why we like to project into that a story, to romanticize, you know. I saw new Levi's commercial ads. Those who are playing with this recession chic, and they're all in black and white, and they're all done in Pittsburgh or Detroit, in totally deserted, you know, factories with no workers. And then you could see, and suddenly I felt nostalgia for American recession of 30s, and I thought, why? Am I crazy? Why should I be nostalgic for a time of poverty? But this is about manipulation, you know, about those beautiful ads which are projecting into something which is mathematics and figures. You know, we like to put something more, something metaphysical, something a little bit of past also, you know, frontiers and American pioneers and people full of strength who would solve all that. The same way Croats and Serbs operated, with flags and with pride and with this and with that. So you can make a story of anything.
You're suggesting that nostalgia with its melancholy actually is an obstacle to the future, as opposed, because you're calling for memory, you should do serious work, at the same time you're articulating a nostalgic view of Oberlin, Ohio now, which is quite beautiful, but it seems to me that nostalgia precisely because it can't be violated, is an ersatz, a substitute
Yeah.
for memory and for the work of memory that points to a possible future. The power of nostalgia, which is not just in the East. I think when you say you're a West, you go, Moscow, the whole world, because space, as you look out and say, you don't remember this, you don't know this. Memory is threatened globally through the economic, social culture we live in. And I agree with you that memory and the work of recapturing is important, but I'm not sure. It seems to be, as I say, nostalgia seems to be maybe something we have to feel and go through, but in itself it seems to be an obstacle to overcome to a true recapitulation of what the past is.
Yeah, we can, of course it's, but then also what I noticed, nostalgia is really elusive feeling, you know, you have it today, you won't have it tomorrow. I mean, and as I said, it travels in unexpected places. You are never going to find it on the place you expect that it will wait for you. So, besides, nostalgia is a luxurious feeling. You know, it's a moment of contemplation. It's a moment when you don't have anything to do. Like I, jet-lagged in Oberlin, didn't have anything to do at 6 o'clock in the morning, but to go and do a walk in a beautiful empty park and muse about nostalgia and things. So today, people are, at this very moment, people in those areas we are talking about, Yugo nostalgia, they're so much concerned about future and about today and about how to survive. They have other worries to worry, you know, and those worries are recession, unemployment, hunger, loss of rights they knew before, simply fear for their kids, for themselves, for their elderly parent. Its question is simple, simply how to survive. And nostalgia from that point of view is like a, old, chic, beautiful box which you can open a little bit and close.
Because you touched upon the issue with the European Union and potentially under different ideology, but getting the same idea of unification of different nations with respect to their identities, would you be less nostalgic if you look into the future and potential unification of what used to be Yugoslavia in a larger perspective, larger European perspective? Years ago when we wrote Nice People Don't Mention Such Things, you were quite skeptical about this. How do you feel now in 2011?
To be honest, this is not anymore my problem or a problem of my heart. It was when it was genuine, when it was authentic, and when it was dangerous too to have such feelings, you know. When there was, this genuine protest against this culture of oblivion and amnesia. So, but today, I would say that how those people are going to organize themselves, how they're going to live. Of course, this is all but it doesn't. It is not anymore, the matter of my heart and my feelings and my sentiments. If that is what you asked me, in fact. Yeah. So what are you nostalgic for?
Nap time. Cookies at nap time.
Be immediately nostalgic. Don't wait 50 or 70 years.
We can, I see that we're coming on to 5:30. We have refreshments back in the Slavic Eastern Languages and Literatures Department, lines 210, and we can continue our conversation over some food and drink if you'd like to make your way back to the department. But I want to thank the
Great.